So we already established the fact that there are 4 components to decrease. Increase my love for your supremacy, increase my trust in your wise purposes, decrease my personal influence, and then increase my joyful faith. So again, we got 3 increases and 1 decrease. However, if we're going to continue and understand what decrease means in light of John 3, we must further define it if we're to better understand how it applies. And so I really want to offer this definition: dying to self in a way that allows God's kingdom to come into greater view. That's what decrease is all about. I'll say it again. Dying to self in a way that allows God's kingdom to come into greater view. Now, dying to self, you could be, I don't know what that means. We haven't gotten to the death D yet. Okay, I get that. Dying to self is simply saying that, God, your thoughts, your ways are so infinitely higher than my thoughts and my ways, it makes total sense to invest my trust in your thoughts and your ways. I'm saying, you know what? I recognize my idiosyncrasies, my desires of the flesh. I recognize that, but I'm saying that you are more worthy of that. So I'm going to say yes to you and no to me. A pretty basic, general description of what dying to yourself. But really, you could kind of, you get the picture that decrease and dying to yourself go together. They're practically synonymous. So to better understand the kingdom of God, it's important we understand our place with respect to it. And as mentioned this past Sunday, we just watched it. Though there's no biblical definition of the kingdom of God, we're given plenty of evidence as to what it's like, i.e. a place where goodness, joy, and peace abound, right? A place where we're filled with the Spirit and remain in the Spirit. It's not just being filled, because again, it's the faucet life. The faucet life, okay? We're filled, we're meant to pour out and be filled again, right? That's what remaining in the Spirit is like. How many of you know, like, you can't drink 1 glass of water to quench your thirst for your entire life? You got to keep drinking it, right? Filled with the Spirit implies remaining in the Spirit. When we embrace the good news and realize the kingdom of God can be experienced in this life, that's part of what Jesus came to earth, right? To tell people the good news is here. It's right in front of your face, i.e. Nicodemus, as we'll see in a second. It only makes sense to want to know how we play our part in extending it. We have a part in this. We have a part in the kingdom of heaven being experienced on earth. And how we do that, how we demonstrate that, is through the Spirit-filled life. So with that said, we could better understand how this decrease applies in John 3. In essence, we have 2 characters. Tell me, besides Jesus, who are the 2 characters in John 3? I already mentioned one. Nicodemus. Yes, Nicodemus and John the Baptist. Very good. Who are coming to terms with their decrease in different ways in the light of Jesus. For Nicodemus, Jesus was challenging him to see the kingdom of God as separate from any earthly kingdom, and to know God, to know Christ as the only way to that kingdom. That makes sense? Nicodemus thought along the lines of the Pharisee. He totally had bought into the philosophy, the theology of the spiritual leaders of his day. But Jesus is like, no. This is what the kingdom looks like. This is what being born again looks like. He had it all wrong. If I'm at Nicodemus, I'm like, I appreciate Nicodemus so much. We give him a bad rap, but like for him to get that far, to be willing to put his reputation on the line, to have that encounter, that conversation with Jesus, actually, it blows my mind. There was a lot of faith that Nicodemus had to exercise to get to that point, to have that exchange. So Nicodemus, we may think, oh man, he's so ignorant. What? He hardly knows squat. He's stupid. No, he's not. He actually is he's doing what we should do all the time. Now he's putting yourself in position to know more, to discover more, to take that next step in faith. For John the Baptist, Jesus was inspiring him to keep doing what he had been doing, i.e. to make a way for him, just doing it a different way. John the Baptist, his whole life, he got it. His whole life was centered on making a way for the one that was to come, Jesus Christ. Making a way, he essentially was like a red carpet, like his ministry was like rolling out the red carpet for Jesus, right? We don't have time to get to it tonight. I was going to show a clip. Have you all seen Bambi in here? The animated classic, Disney's favorite animated film.
I haven't seen it. Wait.
I'm pretty sure.
Nemo?
Well, like the late Walt Disney. The founder of it all, who was there from the beginning for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. His favorite animated classic that was on his watch was Bambi, if I'm not mistaken. Now, it's depressing because the mom dies, but okay, so the end.
Watch it because my mom says it's so sad. I don't even want
It is, you know what, it's a blend. It's like you have to be willing to enjoy the high points with the low points. But the ending, if you want to see me tear up, watch the ending with me. When the dad and the son are on the cliff and the dad steps down, he doesn't get shot, he doesn't die. It's not like he's going to, the meadow to get shot, okay? It's like he just knows that my time has come to pass the baton, to pass the torch to my son. He is now the king of the mountain. He is, that's like the deer pride rock, in a way. Like,
He's the little prince.
but I make that comparison, guys, John the Baptist was the epitome of remaining in the Spirit, which is interesting to think about because Jesus, like John the Baptist was preparing the way for Jesus, and Jesus was preparing the way for the Spirit-filled life after he went back into heaven, right? So it's like, to say John the Baptist was Spirit-filled, like, is that possible? He was filled. Here's the thing, John the Baptist constantly lived under the faucet. So I said John the Baptist, Jesus was inspiring him to keep doing what he had been doing to make a way for him, just a different way. This leads me to my first important realization, that is, though seasons may change, though the how-to of our calling may alter, our identity, our who we are, never does. So seasons may change, but our identity never does. We see this contrast clearly in John 3. With John, there was a time when he was the CBO, the commanding baptizing officer. It's not an actual official title. That's my only pun of the night. He was the de facto default, the go-to for people to get spiritually filled and purified. He was the cleanser of containers for those who were longing to be filled with what was to come, as I kind of alluded to. However, because John's eyes were constantly on the prize, he remained filled in the Spirit. That's how it happened for him. And when the time came for him to get out of the way, which is just another word for decrease, he was able to do that joyfully in a way that kept pointing people to Jesus, which I really want to put the emphasis on. There's a lot of different ways we could describe decrease. Dying to self in a way that allows God's kingdom to come to greater view. Sometimes the best way to do that is to point people to Jesus. That's what John the Baptist did with his life. He pointed people to Jesus. This leads me to a second important takeaway. It's impossible to point people to Jesus if we're not filled with the Spirit. Why? Because if we're not filled with the Spirit, then we can't demonstrate what a relationship with God looks like. We can't show people what heaven looks like. But Cam, I don't get how diminishing and stepping back and all these, decreased terms can be a good thing. It doesn't make any sense. In the flesh, yes, it doesn't make any sense. Yet when we go back to our earlier definition of decrease, dying to self in a way that allows God's kingdom to come in a greater view, we see that this is a Spirit-filled prescription to seeing how Jesus sees decrease. So yes, by culture standards, decrease is the leading deed to demotion, which we can agree it's not an ideal term, demotion. We kind of cringe, right? We don't want anything to do with that. We try to avoid at all costs. We see that modeled in the world we live in all the time. We're constantly going for what we see as increase. We're going for promotion, not demotion, right? Advance, more. I get more, something that I find beneficial. But when we take a step back and consider why we do this, I suggest it's because we associate who we are by what we do. And if what we do changes, it's easy to think who we are changes as well. It's what we talked about last week and what Leif was talking about 2 Sundays ago. It goes back to the original deception. At the garden, the fall of man, when Satan inverted the divine order of identity, we aren't who we are because of what we do. We are first, and then we do as an overflow. People define who they are by what they do all the time. And it's a common trait of unbelievers. But it's like, God is the I am, and we get to be the we are because of him. Satan wanted to twist the order. It's like, tempting Eve to be like, if you take this, you will know. You will have this. You will have the knowledge. You will have the discernment between what is right and what is wrong. Eve forgot who she was. And Adam did too. But again, because we can know the Spirit-filled life, the Spirit-filled believers, we know we are not what we do, we are who we are. And when we fully accept this reality, then we can increase in the places we're meant to increase. In love, in trust, in faith, in joy as we die to ourselves. See the increased image, right? What's cool about increasing and decrease, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, about increasing and decrease is the more we do it, the easier it gets. Not only to yield to God's supremacy, his power and authority, but to yield in love and joy. The easier it gets to trust in both God's purposes and his perfect timing for which they are to be carried out. John the Baptist knew that it was time. He knew it was the perfect time. What happens, in that latter stages, which sets this verse up. He sees, people come to him asking the question, Jesus is starting to baptize all these people. Like, he's stealing your thunder. It's like, no. He knew this was going to happen. His eye was on the prize. He knew that this time was going to come. If we're spirit-filled, then when the time comes, we're not going to be taken by surprise, just like God's not taken by surprise. We still have our free will to make our own choices, but our original decision isn't dependent on those choices. Neither is it dependent on our timeline or our influence and perception of it. People want to base, who they are on the choices that they make and what the outcome is. Greater influence, for instance. Like, we define ourselves by numbers and qualifiers and, self-placed boundaries, and it's just like we get so far off track sometimes. No wonder people get stressed out and anxious and have these spiritual strongholds that they need to be set free from. All this to say, when we consider the components of decrease that are on the board, number 1 through 4, we soon discover whether there's an in front of crease or a D. It's all about Christ increasing and knowing there's always a way for this to happen no matter what we're going through or how we are. I am plus we are equals John 3:29 through 30. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. He must increase, but I must decrease. So decrease is really a super exciting thing to do. We get out of the way so Jesus can make a way. There are times where, I look back and I can see, Lissa has this face where it's like you're taking on what God should do face. It's really, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like when I'm talking too much or when I'm, trying to be super youth pastor leader, man. And, and he's like, no, you need to, this is the time where you let, now, God invade. I know that look after being married for 4 years. And it's the whole John the Baptist mentality that he just got. So I want to be more like John the Baptist throughout my life. I really want to grow in these steps. So if you can look at these 4 components of decrease and you find, I'm good at this, but maybe not good at that, find that weak spot and really pray into it this week in your quiet time. And we'll spend the next couple of Wednesdays when we meet, talking and following up on that.